You have been doing it right, every step of it. The vision board on your wall, the morning visualization, the notes you wrote about the life you want, the screenshots saved on your phone of the apartment, the car, the number. You did what you were told to do. And still, something has not moved the way it should have. That gap between what you visualize and what you actually have, it is still there, sitting quietly, stubbornly. Here is what nobody told you. The practice itself may be the problem, not your commitment to it, not your consistency, the practice. There is a specific signal that runs underneath every visualization session, underneath every vision board, underneath every moment you spend staring at a picture of something you do not yet have. And that signal is not abundance. It is distance. It is the unmistakable frequency of a person who is standing outside the window looking in. Wanting and having feel like 2 points on the same road. They are not. They are 2 entirely different transmissions. Every time you rehearse wanting something you do not have, you are not pulling it closer. You are broadcasting the one signal that guarantees it stays exactly where it is. This is not a reframe you have heard before. It is not a softer version of something familiar. What you are about to understand is the precise mechanical reason why so many people who work the hardest at manifestation stay poorest at it. And what the ones who actually move do differently, inside their own minds, before a single external thing changes. By the time this is finished, you will not see that vision board the same way again. Chapter 1. Your vision board is a poverty shrine. There is a practice that has lived in human culture far longer than the glossy magazines and motivational seminars that packaged it for the modern world. Across time, across continents, in cultures that never shared a language or a border, people have created images of the life they wanted. They painted it on walls. They carved it into wood. They pressed it between the pages of sacred texts. The practice is ancient, instinctive, and deeply human. But somewhere in the translation from ancient impulse to morning ritual, something went wrong. A quiet error crept in. An error so small, so well-intentioned, so completely invisible that millions of people repeat it daily without ever suspecting it, is the reason their desired life stays just out of reach. You may be one of them. By the time this chapter ends, you will understand exactly what that error is, why it works against you, and why no amount of glitter glue or magazine cutouts will fix it until you do. Meet Camille. She is 32 years old. She lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city, and she has been practicing manifestation for 6 years. She has a vision board. She actually has 3, one on the closet door, one propped against the bedroom mirror, and a digital version set as her phone wallpaper. She meditates most mornings. She journals gratitude at night. She has read the books, listened to the podcasts, repeated the affirmations out loud in the car on the way to a job she is still trying to leave. She believes. Nobody who knows Camille would question how much she believes. And yet, the apartment is the same one she moved into at 26. The job is the same job, one small raise in 4 years. The vacation she cut from a travel magazine and pinned to her board in the corner, the one with the turquoise water and the white sand, has remained there for 3 years. It is curling slightly at the edges now, the image slowly fading. She does not take it down. Taking it down would feel like giving up. So she looks at it every morning while she gets dressed, feels a pull in her chest that is equal parts desire and dull ache, and tells herself it is coming. It is not coming, not the way she is reaching for it. Here is the question Camille has never thought to ask herself. Hold it in your mind for the next several minutes, because the answer sits at the center of everything this book is about. When Camille stands in front of that vision board and looks at the life she wants, what feeling is actually running through her body in that moment? Not the feeling she aims for, not the feeling she tells herself she is generating, the feeling that is actually present. Think about that before we go further. Here is what most people teaching manifestation get wrong. They teach you to want loudly. They say feel the desire, see it vividly, call it in with emotion. And they are not entirely wrong. Emotion is involved. But the particular emotion matters more than almost any other variable in the entire process. When you stand in front of a collection of images depicting things you do not have, in a life you are trying to escape, the dominant emotional signal your body generates is not faith. It is hunger. Hunger is not the same thing as having. Hunger is the feeling of absence. It is your nervous system broadcasting a signal that something is missing. And if you are using a vision board while that signal is running, you are not practicing abundance. You are rehearsing the frequency of lack. You are training your attractor pattern to feel at home in the wanting, not in the having. You are, without meaning to, building a shrine to everything you do not yet possess. That is the wanting loop, and Camille has been living inside it for 6 years. This is the part where most people feel resistance. The vision board is not a symbol of delusion or naivety. It is a symbol of hope. It is one of the few places in a person's life where they let themselves want something beautiful without apologizing for it. Being told that the thing you have used as a rope to pull yourself toward a better life might actually be an anchor holding you in place. That is uncomfortable. Good. Discomfort means the idea is landing somewhere real. Here is what you need to understand about the mechanics of this. Your brain does not distinguish cleanly between a vividly imagined experience and an actual one. This is not mysticism. It is how the human mind processes emotion and behavior. When you imagine something with genuine feeling, your body responds to the feeling, not the imagined scene. The outcome depends entirely on which feeling you are generating. If you look at a picture of a beach house and feel longing, your body gets very good at the emotional state of longing for a beach house. If you look at the same picture and feel the specific, quiet satisfaction of someone who already owns it, your body gets good at that state instead. One of those states draws you toward the house. The other rehearses the distance between you and it. Camille was practicing distance. She was not doing it consciously. Nobody does. The wanting loop is seductive because it feels like action. Standing in front of your vision board feels like doing something. It feels intentional. It feels different from doing nothing. And it is doing something. It is just doing the wrong thing repeatedly with great sincerity. Bring to mind the version of you waking up each morning before these last 3 years unfolded without polishing the memory. The things you wanted then, the images if you had them, the affirmations if you used them. How much of what you were reaching for then is still on the list today? Not because the goal changed, because the goal stayed exactly the same and the gap between you and it is still roughly the same size. That gap is a clue. That gap has something to tell you. Most people look at the gap and conclude they need to want harder. They add more images to the board. They write the affirmation bigger. They try to manufacture more emotion. But wanting harder is just more hunger. And you cannot eat your way out of hunger by describing the meal in greater detail. You need something different entirely. There was a man named Dorian who spent 4 years watching videos of the life he wanted before he realized he was watching from the wrong seat. He would sit in his studio apartment in the evenings after his second job and watch YouTube walkthroughs of high-end real estate. He told himself it was motivation. He genuinely believed that seeing those spaces would pull him toward them. Maybe it did a little. But one night, exhausted and frustrated, he noticed something. Every time he watched those videos, he felt worse afterward. Not inspired, not energized, heavier. Because the watching always ended the same way. He pressed pause, the video stopped, and he was still in the studio apartment. He had spent 2 hours practicing the emotional state of a man who does not live in the house he is watching. He had rehearsed not having with tremendous focus. After that night, he stopped watching. He did something stranger instead. He started sitting quietly in his own space, closing his eyes and generating the specific internal feeling of someone who had already arrived. Not picturing the house, feeling the state, the ease, the quiet sense of sufficiency. It felt almost too simple. It felt almost like lying to himself. But within 8 months, his income had shifted enough that he signed a lease on a place 3 times the size of the studio. The videos he had watched so hungrily. He never thought to go back to them. The wanting loop is broken from the inside. Not by wanting less, not by giving up the image of what you desire, but by changing the emotional signal that runs underneath the image. The house, the income, the vacation with the turquoise water, none of those things are the problem. Camille's problem was never the picture of the beach. Her problem was the feeling she brought to the picture. Every morning she looked at it and practiced being the woman who does not have that trip yet. 6 years of practice. 6 years of rehearsing the wanting. In a later section, you will hear a point about gratitude and how it works in relation to wealth that overturns the common assumption. After that really registers, it immediately changes what you actually do in the morning before you check your phone. But first, you need to feel the full weight of what the wanting loop costs you. Not just financially, not just in terms of goals deferred. The wanting loop has a tax that nobody talks about. It is the slow, quiet erosion of your own trust in yourself. Every year you practice longing and arrive in the same place, a part of you begins to believe that the life you want is reserved for other people. You do not say that out loud. You might not even admit it in your journal, but the belief accumulates in your body like sediment. Eventually, it starts to feel less like a temporary state and more like your permanent address. That belief is not the truth. It is the residue of a broken technique. Camille is not behind because she is not good enough, not focused enough, not deserving enough. Camille is behind because she learned to use her most powerful tool in reverse. She learned to signal for the life she wanted from the feeling of not having it. You cannot broadcast the frequency of lack and receive the signal of having. The vision board you built to save you has been practicing poverty every morning. The question the next chapter will answer is this: what does it actually feel like to inhabit the state of already having? And how do you enter that state when your current circumstances are loudly telling you that you do not? Chapter 2. Wanting louder does not attract faster. Wanting more is supposed to work. That is what you were told. Nearly everyone who has ever picked up a book about manifestation, watched a video about the law of attraction, or pinned a picture of a house to a board on their wall, they all believe the same thing. They believe that wanting harder, wanting more clearly, wanting with more fire and more feeling will bring what they want closer. They are wrong. Not partially wrong. Not wrong in one small technical sense, wrong in the exact direction that matters most. The error is invisible while you are making it, and the harder you want, the deeper the error runs. This chapter will show you why. By the end of it, you will understand something that changes what you actually do every morning when you open your eyes. Here is the question this chapter opened with, though you may not have heard it as a question yet. What is the difference between wanting something and inhabiting the feeling of already having it? Hold that. We will come back to it. You know what wanting feels like. It has a texture. It is reaching, leaning forward, stretching towards something that is not yet here. When you look at the number in your bank account and feel that hollow pull in your chest, that is wanting. When you see someone else driving the car you have been picturing and your stomach tightens slightly, that is wanting. When you stare at your vision board and feel that mix of inspiration and low-grade ache, that is wanting too. Wanting is not nothing. It is real, it is human, and there is nothing broken about you for feeling it. But wanting has a home address, and the address is lack. Every single time you generate the feeling of wanting something, your nervous system registers the same foundational signal. This thing is not here yet. That signal is not neutral. It is a state your body learns to live in. And here is where the science stops being abstract and starts being about your life specifically. Researchers studying visualization found something most people in the self-help world have quietly misrepresented. When subjects were asked to visualize a desired outcome, two completely different neurological processes could occur depending on how they visualized. One group imagined the process of achieving the goal, feeling what it felt like to already be the person on the other side. Their brain activity during the visualization closely mirrored what the brain does during actual experience. Another group imagined wanting the outcome, picturing it in front of them, reaching toward it mentally. Their brain registered the desired object as separate from the self. Two completely different signals. Same exercise. Entirely different result. The first group was practicing having. The second group was practicing wanting. The distinction matters because your brain, left to its own patterns, will rehearse whatever it rehearsed most yesterday. Go back to the version of you waking up each morning before these last 3 years unfolded without polishing the memory. Not in vague terms, specifically. Where were you living? What were you worried about? What did you tell yourself you were going to do differently? Now ask yourself honestly, how much of that worry is still alive in some form today? Things may have changed significantly. But the emotional pattern underneath, the reaching, the not quite there-ness, the feeling that you are one breakthrough away from finally being okay, does that feel familiar? If it does, that is not coincidence. That is a trained state. That is your emotional home base. Your emotional home base is the state you return to without deciding to. It is the feeling your body treats as normal, as default, as the floor beneath all other feelings. When good things happen, you may rise briefly above it. When hard things happen, you drop below it. But left alone, without drama in either direction, you drift back to it. It is where you live emotionally without realizing you have chosen it. And for most people who have practiced wanting for years, the home base is the frequency of lack. Not despair, not crisis. Just that low, steady hum that says, not yet, not enough, still working toward it. It is subtle enough that you do not call it suffering. But it is consistent enough that it becomes the lens through which every piece of evidence in your life gets filtered. Here is a woman named Kara. She spent 4 years building what she called her clarity practice. Every morning she wrote out her financial goals in the present tense. She had a board covered in images of the life she wanted. She listened to affirmation recordings in the car. She read every book in the genre. And for 4 years she told everyone around her that she was on the path, that she could feel herself getting closer. But something was quietly wrong. Every time a small amount of money came in, she spent it faster than it arrived, not on luxuries, but on the next course, the next program, the next tool that would finally unlock the thing she could not quite reach. She was not lazy. She was not undisciplined. She was intensely motivated. But the motivation itself was the problem. Every action she took came from the same source, the feeling that she was not there yet. And every tool she bought to close the gap confirmed at the level of felt experience that the gap was still real. Her emotional home base was the space between her and what she wanted. She was practicing that space every day and calling it progress. The practice was not failing her. The practice was working perfectly. It was just practicing the wrong state. What you practice emotionally, you inhabit. What you inhabit consistently, you broadcast. And what you broadcast, your circumstances will find ways to reflect back to you. This is not magic. This is behavior. When your home base is wanting, your decisions are made from wanting. You take the job because you need money, not because it positions you well. You send the message with an edge of desperation you cannot hear but others can. You turn down slow and steady progress because it does not feel urgent enough to satisfy the ache. Wanting does not just feel a certain way. It makes you act a certain way. And those actions produce results that confirm the original feeling. The loop closes on itself. Now here is the door out of the loop. This is the revelation this chapter has been building toward. The universe. And if that word does not sit well with you, call it your subconscious, call it the behavioral feedback system of your life, does not respond to the intensity of your wanting. It responds to the emotional state you inhabit most consistently, not the state you feel in the best moments, not the state you manage to conjure during your morning ritual. The state that is there on a Tuesday afternoon when nothing is happening and you are just existing in your own skin. That state is the signal. Everything else is noise. This means intensity is not your ally. Wanting harder does not send a stronger signal. Wanting harder sends the same signal louder. And that signal says, I do not have this. I do not have this. I do not have this. Every repetition is not a prayer for arrival. It is a confirmation of absence. The state that actually moves things is different in texture. It is quieter. It does not reach. It does not lean. It rests. It is the emotional posture of someone who already has the thing and is simply living in the fact of it, not excitement about receiving it, not relief that it finally came. Just the settled, undefended normalcy of someone for whom this is already true. That state has a name. It is called the state of receivership. And it is not something you feel once and tick off a list. It is something you practice until it becomes your home base, until your nervous system stops treating it as a peak state and starts treating it as the floor. This is where the first question of the chapter resolves once and for all. The difference between wanting something and inhabiting the feeling of already having it is not philosophical. It is physiological. One activates the desire circuit. The other simulates the possession circuit. And only one of them rewires the baseline. You have been told that desire is the engine. Desire is not the engine. Desire is the first spark. The engine is the state you live in between the sparks. Before long, you will hear a point about visualization that overturns the common assumption. Once that becomes real to you, it immediately changes what you actually put on your walls. For now, this is what matters. Every tool you have been using to want harder has been strengthening the wrong muscle. The work ahead is not about feeling more. It is about learning to feel differently, about building a home base that does not ache. The question the next chapter will answer is this: if your circumstances are real, and your bank account is real, and the gap between where you are and where you want to be is measurably real, how do you practice a state your eyes keep telling you is a lie? Chapter 3. The frequency of lack is always broadcasting. Visualization does not fail because you are not trying hard enough. It fails because something older and louder is already running. That sounds like an excuse, the kind of thing people say when they want to stop holding you accountable for your results. It is not. It is a precise description of a measurable conflict happening inside you every single time you sit down to picture the life you want. You are not failing at manifestation because your desire is weak. You are failing because your desire is competing against a signal that has been broadcasting without interruption since you were 7 years old, and it is winning. Now here is the question that will hold this entire chapter together. You already heard it at the end of the last chapter. If your circumstances are real and your bank account is real, and the gap between where you are and where you want to be is measurably real, how do you practice a state your eyes keep telling you is a lie? Hold that question. The answer is coming. But first you need to understand exactly what you are up against, because the solution only makes sense once you see the problem clearly. Think of it like radio. Every radio station in existence transmits on a specific frequency. The DJ in the booth can play any song they choose. They can play a song about wealth, about freedom, about waking up in a house with no mortgage and no alarm clock. But the DJ does not control what frequency the station broadcasts on. That is set by the transmitter. The transmitter sits in a building you may have never visited. It runs on its own power, and it broadcasts the same frequency day and night, whether the DJ is playing triumph or tragedy. Your conscious mind is the DJ. Your subconscious programming is the transmitter. When you sit down to visualize, when you write your affirmations, when you pull images off the internet and arrange them on a board, you are the DJ choosing songs. But the signal going out to the world, the signal that your choices, your habits, your nervous system, and your opportunities actually respond to, that signal is being sent from the transmitter. And most people have never once visited the building where that transmitter lives. This is the frequency of lack, and it does not announce itself. It is not loud. It does not interrupt your visualization with a booming voice saying this will never work. It is quieter than that and far more effective. It operates in the background the way your lungs operate. You do not notice it because it has never stopped. You were not born with it, but by the time you were old enough to want things, it was already installed. Here is where it comes from. Priya grew up in a house where money was discussed in the same tone as emergencies. Not crises necessarily, but close cousins of them. Her mother paid bills in a specific order, the way you triage a wound, the most urgent first, the rest when possible. Her father worked overtime not because he wanted to, but because the alternative was losing something the family could not afford to lose. Nobody sat Priya down and said money is scarce and dangerous and hard to hold. They did not have to. She watched the ritual of it every month. She absorbed the posture, the lowered voice, the relief when a check cleared and the familiar tightening when it did not. Priya grew up, graduated, got a job, started making more money than either of her parents had made at her age. And she sat down one afternoon with a journal and wrote out her financial goals in the careful handwriting of someone who genuinely wanted to believe. She wrote a number, a good number, a number that would change her life. She felt something hopeful and unfamiliar when she wrote it. 3 weeks later, she had spent down her savings account on a purchase she could not fully explain, Not recklessly, not dramatically, just quietly the way water finds a crack. The number in the journal sat there, unchanged. Priya was not weak. She was not undisciplined. She was broadcasting on the frequency she had been tuned to since childhood. And no amount of journal writing was going to retune the transmitter without her first finding the building. That story lives in some version in almost every person who has ever wondered why their efforts at building wealth seem to collapse right before they gain real traction. The mechanism is not mystical. It is consistent with what psychology and neuroscience have observed for decades. Your subconscious mind runs an estimated 95% of your behaviors, your decisions, and your emotional responses. Not 50%, not a third, 95. Think about that for a moment. That leaves 5% for your conscious, deliberate, carefully considered mind. The part of you that sets goals. The part of you that reads books like this one. The part of you that genuinely, urgently wants things to be different. 5%. You are trying to move a building with 5% of the available force, and you are confused about why the building is not moving. The DJ cannot overpower the transmitter by playing better songs. Now pause right here. Remember the version of you waking up each morning before these last 3 years unfolded, without polishing the memory. Not in terms of what you had, think about how you felt about money. Think about the sentence that ran through your head when you saw a price tag that seemed like too much. Think about the feeling in your chest when you checked your bank balance at the end of a month. Has that feeling changed? Or has the amount changed slightly, but the feeling remained exactly the same? Because if the feeling has remained the same, you have been changing channels on the same station. And the station has been broadcasting the same frequency the entire time. That feeling is data, not a judgment. Data. The frequency of lack has a signature you can learn to recognize once you know what to look for. It does not feel like sadness necessarily. Sometimes it feels like urgency, the sense that you need to close a deal right now, that you need to make something happen immediately, because if you do not, the window will close and another opportunity will die the same slow death as the last one. That urgency is not ambition. It is scarcity signaling, the transmitter running at full power. Other times it feels like guilt. You make a little money and immediately feel uncomfortable holding it. You spend it before it can disappear on its own, as if the spending gives you control over a loss you already expect. You have met this version in yourself, probably. Most people who grew up watching money treated as a problem recognize that guilt immediately. And then there is the most invisible form: distraction. You set a financial goal, you feel genuine about it, and then 3 days later you simply stop thinking about it. Not because you gave up, because your nervous system steered you away from sustained contact with an idea that contradicts the program it has been running since before you could read. The transmitter does not argue with you. It just changes the subject. Here is what none of this means. It does not mean you are broken. It does not mean your upbringing has made you permanently incapable of wealth. It does not mean the programming cannot change. It absolutely can change. But you cannot change a program you cannot see, and you cannot see a program you have never been taught to look for. The conventional advice on manifestation skips this entirely. It tells you to want harder, to feel more, to believe deeper. And because that advice is not entirely wrong, desire and belief do matter. You try earnestly. And then the transmitter drowns out the DJ and you are left wondering what you are missing. What you are missing is this: conscious desire and subconscious programming are not on the same level. They do not compete as equals. The subconscious program is not a belief you hold. It is a belief that holds you. It is structural. It is the building the transmitter lives in. Down the line in this book, you will hear a point about the role of positive emotion in building wealth that overturns the common assumption. When that idea snaps into focus, it immediately changes exactly how you use your imagination. But right now, you need to sit with the weight of what this means for the practice you may have been doing for months or years. Every time you visualized wealth while your subconscious was broadcasting lack, you were not making progress toward your goal. You were practicing the wanting loop. You were rehearsing the gap. The image of what you desired was real in the booth, but the frequency going out into your decisions and your nervous system and your behavior was still the old signal. Nothing on the outside changed because nothing on the inside had been retransmitted. Think about a garden hose. You can stand at the faucet and turn it on full pressure and aim it at the most beautiful patch of dry ground you have ever seen. But if there is a kink somewhere in the middle of that hose, the water does not care about your pressure or your aim. It builds up on one side of the kink and trickles on the other. The kink is the subconscious program, and most manifestation practice never touches the hose. Now you have the answer to the question this chapter opened with. How do you practice a state your eyes keep telling you is a lie? You do it by understanding that practicing the state is not the same as pretending the circumstances do not exist. It means finding the transmitter and learning to change what it broadcasts, rather than trying to sing over it from the DJ booth. The circumstances do not have to change first. The signal does. And when the signal changes, the circumstances follow, not because of magic, but because 95% of the decisions that create your circumstances are being run by the program in the transmitter. Change what it runs and you change what you decide, what you pursue, what you tolerate and what you refuse. The circumstances are the last thing to change. They are the printout. The transmitter wrote the file. You cannot out-visualize a program that is running 95% of your waking life. But you can find it. And once you find it, the question becomes not how loudly you can broadcast want, but what exactly are you going to replace it with? Chapter 4. Rich people don't manifest, they inhabit. Something valuable is leaving your hands in real time, and it is not being taken loudly. It is being taken in the quiet space between wanting and having. Every hour you spend generating desire, visualizing, wishing, affirming the future you do not yet have, is an hour your nervous system spends practicing a very specific emotional state. Not wealth. Wanting. That distinction costs more than most people will ever calculate, not because wanting is shameful, but because want and have are neurologically opposite positions. You cannot act from both at the same time. The one you rehearse is the one that shapes your behavior. The one that shapes your behavior is the one that shapes your results. Right now, without knowing it, you may be rehearsing the wrong one. That is not your fault. But it is your problem, and this chapter exists to show you exactly what is running in the background and what to run instead. The previous section put a question on the table and it is still in the room. Not how loudly you can broadcast want, but what you are going to replace it with. That is the right question. It deserves a real answer, not a slogan, not a rewording of advice you have already received. A real, functional, mechanical answer about how high-achieving people actually use their minds before outcomes arrive. Here is the open question that will sit with you for the next several minutes. If two people visualize the same outcome with equal frequency, why does one of them start taking different actions within weeks, while the other spends another year collecting vision boards? The answer is not motivation. It is not belief. It is something more specific than either of those words. You will have the full picture before this chapter ends. Start here. Athletes have been using mental rehearsal for decades, and the sports science behind it is precise enough to be instructive. A sprinter preparing for a race does not visualize wanting to cross the finish line first. She does not picture herself in the stands watching herself run, wishing it were real. She steps into the body that has already run the race. She feels her feet in the starting blocks. She feels the specific tension in her calves at the moment before the gun fires. She feels the air resistance at top speed, the forward lean, the exact moment the tape breaks across her chest. Her brain, at the level of motor neurons, cannot cleanly distinguish between that vivid rehearsal and the actual event. The nervous system fires in preparation. The body rehearses competence, not longing. That is the critical difference. She is not practicing desire. She is practicing execution. Now consider what most manifestation instruction actually asks you to do. Feel the emotion of having it. See it clearly. Want it with intensity. Notice what those instructions are actually coding. They are asking you to stand outside the thing and look at it. They are placing you in the position of the person who does not yet have it, looking across a gap toward the person who does. That emotional gap, that reaching, is the signal your system registers most clearly, not the image of the desired outcome. The reaching, the not having it yet. And your behavior follows the signal, not the image. Look back at the life you were living back then, 3 years ago, without polishing the memory. Not in broad strokes, in the specific texture of a regular Tuesday. Where were you when you woke up? What was the first financial thought that arrived before you even reached for your phone? Was it a number you were short of? Was it something you needed that you did not have? Was it a calculation of how far away something felt? Sit with that for a moment. Because 3 years of Tuesdays that start that way are not neutral. They are 3 years of practicing the emotional position of someone who is still waiting. The mind does not know it is waiting for something good. It only knows the state of waiting itself, and it builds its behavioral patterns around that state. This is the mechanism. This is what the wanting loop actually does at the level of daily action. Consider a woman named Carmen. She had spent 2 years running a freelance design business that paid her rent but never more than rent. She had a folder on her laptop called Future. Inside it were screenshots of studio spaces, invoices from designers who charged 4 times what she charged, and screenshots of Instagram posts from people living the version of the business she wanted. Every evening she would open that folder, feel the pull of it, and close her laptop feeling simultaneously inspired and deflated. She told herself the inspiration was fuel. She told herself she was getting clearer on what she wanted. What she did not notice was what she did the morning after every folder session. She sent emails with discounted rates before the client even asked. She undersold her timelines. She said yes to projects that paid less, because she was still, unconsciously, operating from the position of someone who needed more. The folder was keeping her oriented toward a version of herself that had not arrived yet, and she acted accordingly. Every day, a colleague suggested something strange. Stop looking at the folder as a destination. Start making decisions from inside it. Not what would she do to get there. What would she do if she were already there? The first time Carmen tried this, she quoted a project at twice her usual rate. Her hands were shaking. She sent it anyway. The client agreed without negotiating. She did not get rich overnight, but something in her behavioral baseline shifted from that week forward. Let that sit for a moment before the explanation. The difference was not that Carmen believed harder. It was not that she wanted it more. It was that she temporarily relocated the position from which she was making decisions. Instead of acting from a place of building toward, she acted from a place of already established. The instructions she gave her own nervous system changed. And when the instructions change, the actions change. And when the actions change, so do the results, not by magic, by arithmetic. This is what is meant by inhabiting rather than manifesting. Manifesting, as it is commonly practiced, keeps you in the role of the caller. You are the one placing the order, broadcasting the frequency, making the request. Inhabiting is different. Inhabiting means you are already inside the outcome, making the small daily decisions that a person inside that outcome actually makes. The person who already has the successful business does not discount before being asked. The person who already lives in financial security does not catastrophize a slow week. The person who already earns at the level they want does not shrink their pricing because they are nervous. These are not mindset differences. They are behavioral differences, and behavior is downstream of the state you are rehearsing. A little later, you will run into an idea about vision boards and visualization tools that clashes with the familiar story. Once that lands, it changes how you use those tools entirely. For now, stay with the mechanics. The neurological distinction between wanting and having is not poetic. It is measurable. Researchers studying goal pursuit have documented what they call a regulatory fit effect. People who imagine a desired future as already achieved show different approach behaviors than people who imagine the same future as something to be attained. The first group tends toward consolidation and expansion. The second tends toward striving and seeking. Both groups are motivated, but they are running different behavioral programs. The striving group often outperforms at the beginning because urgency is a useful short-term fuel. But over 12 months, over 2 years, the consolidation group outperforms significantly. They are making decisions from a fundamentally more stable position. Stability is not passivity. Do not confuse those two things. The sprinter rehearsing the race is not passive. She is intensely active, but her activity is organized around the experience of having already run well, not around the desperation of needing to run well. That is the organizing principle. That is what changes everything downstream. So what does this look like in practice? Not in the abstract, in the specific. You wake up on a Wednesday. You have a financial goal you are working toward. The wanting loop version of that morning starts with what you do not have yet. It starts with the gap, the distance, the weight of where you are measured against where you want to be. The inhabiting version starts somewhere different. It starts with the question a person who has already arrived would ask. Not how do I get there, but what is the best decision available to me today? Not how do I close the gap, but what does someone at that level actually do on a Wednesday morning? Those are not the same question. They do not produce the same answers. And over 300 Wednesdays, the difference in answers compiles into something visible. You are not pretending. You are not lying to yourself about your current bank balance. You are practicing the behavioral logic of the destination instead of the emotional logic of departure. There is a significant difference between those two things. The difference lives entirely in which state you rehearse most. The wanting loop keeps you expert at wanting. The rehearsal of having keeps you practiced at the actions that having requires. So here is where this lands. The shift from wanting to having is not a word choice. It is not a reframe you apply once and walk away from. It is a practice of consistently relocating the position from which you make decisions. And the moment you begin making decisions from inside the outcome rather than outside it, your behavior changes first. Everything else follows behavior, not the other way around. The question the next chapter answers is this: If inhabiting is the practice, what are you actually supposed to feel when the evidence around you directly contradicts the state you are trying to inhabit? Chapter 5. The evidence you collect confirms your prison. Seeing less money does not make you poorer. Believing you will always see less money does. That sounds like the kind of philosophical comfort people offer when they cannot actually help you pay rent. It is not. It is a description of a real, physical mechanism inside your brain. A mechanism that is running right now, selecting what you notice, filtering what you ignore, and quietly building a case that your current financial situation is the only one that could ever be true for someone like you. The question forming in your mind right now should be this: what exactly is that mechanism? How long has it been building that case, and can you turn it off? The answer to all three is in this chapter. But first you need to understand what it actually feels like to live inside a closed evidence loop, because you may be living inside one right now without knowing it has a name. Here is what the evidence the previous chapter asked you to sit with actually does once you have collected it. It does not stay neutral. It does not just inform you. It gets filed, cross-referenced, and used to predict the future. Your brain is not a camera. It is a prosecutor. Call up to the way you read money at that earlier point as honestly as you can. Not the number in your account. The feeling you carried about money. The low-grade hum of it, the way it colored small decisions. Whether to order the thing you actually wanted or the cheaper version. Whether to answer the phone when an unknown number called. Whether you let yourself believe the good thing would actually happen. That feeling had evidence. And 3 years later, you have more evidence for the same feeling. This is the mirror you need to hold up right now. Camille was back in her apartment on a Tuesday morning, and she had done everything right by the standard she had been taught. The vision board was on the wall. The numbers were written in gold marker across the top, the pictures of the house and the travel and the life. She had been adding to it for 2 years. She looked at it every morning. But before the board was even in her line of sight, she had already checked her banking app. The number was the same as yesterday, which was nearly the same as the month before. Her brain noted this. Then she made coffee. The milk was low. She decided not to buy more until the end of the week to be careful. Her brain noted that too. She passed the window. The woman in the building across the street was getting into a car that Camille recognized as expensive. Camille felt a quick, cold thing that she would have called admiration if you asked her. But it was actually a confirmation. Something in her said, "That is not for people like me." Her brain noted it, filed it, added it to the case. By 9 in the morning, she had collected 4 separate pieces of evidence that her financial life was fixed and small. She had not done this on purpose. She had not woken up and decided to find proof she was stuck. The mechanism did it for her. Here is the name of that mechanism. Naming it is the first step to seeing it clearly. It is called the reticular activating system. It is a small cluster of neural tissue at the base of your brain. It acts as a filter between the 10 million bits of sensory information arriving every second and the roughly 40 bits your conscious mind can actually process. Your brain cannot show you everything. So it shows you what it has been trained to look for. And what has it been trained to look for? Whatever you have given the most emotional charge, whatever you have thought about most consistently, whatever carries the strongest feeling. For Camille, the strongest feeling around money was lack. Not hate, not fear exactly, just the quiet, steady hum of not enough. And so her reticular activating system had quietly become the most efficient lack finder she had ever employed, working around the clock, unpaid, tirelessly clipping every piece of evidence that confirmed the story. This is not a metaphor. When you decide to buy a particular car, suddenly you see that car everywhere on the road. The cars were always there. Your filter had simply not been set to catch them. The same principle runs your financial reality. The same mechanism that finds the car finds the evidence of struggle or the evidence of ease, depending on which emotional frequency you have been rehearsing. And rehearsing lack, which is what wanting does, trains the filter to catch lack. What does rehearsing want feel like from the inside? It feels like hope. It feels like working hard towards something. It feels like responsible awareness of where you are so you can get to where you want to be. This is why the wanting loop is so hard to escape. It disguises itself as diligence. Checking the bank account repeatedly does not feel like training your brain to find more evidence of shortage. It feels like staying on top of things. But your brain does not distinguish between monitoring and rehearsing. Every time you check and the number disappoints you, the nervous system registers that disappointment. That emotional signal is the training data. You are not staying informed. You are filing another exhibit in the case against your own financial expansion. There is a man named Darius who drove delivery trucks for 11 years and spent most of that time convinced that the math of his life simply did not work in his favor. He was not wrong about the numbers. The numbers were real, but Darius had developed what he later described as a talent for finding the floor. Whenever something went slightly well, a small bonus, a cheaper car repair than expected, a month where the bills fell just right, Darius would notice it, and then immediately locate the reason it could not last. He was not pessimistic by nature. He was a warm person, funny in the way people are when they have survived things. But his brain had been running the lack confirmation process for so long that good evidence genuinely did not stick. It passed through. The bad evidence landed with weight. One evening his daughter asked him why he never seemed happy when something good happened. Darius told her he did not want to get ahead of himself. She was 9 years old. She said, "Okay, but what if getting ahead of yourself is how you get ahead?" Darius thought about that sentence for 3 months before he acted on it. He started doing something small and almost embarrassing in its simplicity. When something went right financially, even something minor, he stopped immediately scanning for the catch. He let the good thing be real for a full hour before he did anything else. He did not deny the hard things. He did not pretend the floor was not there. He just stopped letting the floor be the loudest thing. Over the following year, what Darius described was not a dramatic reversal. It was a shift in what he noticed. Opportunities that had always been present started to feel like they were addressed to him. His reticular activating system had been reset, not by wishful thinking, by deliberate, sustained attention to a different category of evidence. Now here is the principle that most people working with manifestation practices never land on clearly. Your brain is not finding reality. Let that sit for one breath. It is not finding objective, neutral, complete reality. It is finding confirmation of what it already believes. And if what it already believes is built on the frequency of lack, then every morning you wake up, your filter goes to work building a better case for the prison you already live in. The walls are not made of facts. They are made of selected facts, the particular slice of everything that exists which your trained filter has been set to catch. Poverty beliefs do not just make you feel bad. They make you see poverty evidence, and poverty evidence confirms poverty beliefs. The loop is self-sealing. Further on, you will run into an idea about visualization that clashes with the familiar story. When that becomes clear, it changes exactly how you use images, emotion, and daily attention to rewire your financial filter. But right now, Back in Camille's apartment, the vision board is still on the wall. Here is the thing about the vision board that Chapter 1 left open, and that this chapter is now ready to address. The vision board itself is not the problem. What Camille does inside herself when she looks at it is the problem. She looks at those images from a position of wanting. The feeling underneath her gaze is distance. The pictures are over there and she is over here. The emotional tone her nervous system files every morning is not the tone of someone who already has. It is the tone of someone who can see through the glass at the thing they cannot touch. Her reticular activating system receives this signal. Distance. Lack. Not yet. And then it goes to work finding confirmation. This is the cost of evidence gathering from the wrong emotional address. The tool you trust most to remind you of what you want may be the very thing that reinforces why you do not have it. So the question is not whether to stop looking at what you want. The question is where you are standing emotionally when you look at it. The filter can be reset, not all at once, not by forcing optimism onto a situation that is genuinely hard, but by understanding that the evidence around you right now is not a complete picture of what is possible. It is a receipt for what you have been rehearsing. Stop collecting evidence that you are stuck, and the prison stops having walls. Chapter 6. Gratitude is not enough, it must be specific. Something is leaking out of your life right now. Not dramatically. Not in one large loss you could point to and grieve. It is leaking out in the space between what you feel when you practice gratitude and what you actually experience when you close your notebook and walk back into your day. Every morning you write down 3 things you are grateful for. You feel a brief warmth. Then the warmth fades before you have finished your coffee. That is not a small thing. That gap between the ritual and the result is costing you. The subconscious mind that governs your attractor pattern is not moved by the ritual. It is moved by something far more specific, far more physical, far more real than a list of pleasant abstractions. If no one has told you what that something is, you have been practicing every day and wondering why the numbers in your account are not reflecting the practice. This chapter is where that changes. The prison stops having walls when you stop collecting evidence of confinement. That was the landing point of everything before this moment. But here is the question that naturally follows. If you stop rehearsing lack, what exactly do you rehearse instead? Not gratitude, not as you have been taught it. Gratitude in its most common form is a surface-level emotional acknowledgement. You feel thankful for your health, your family, the roof over your head. These are real things. They deserve your attention. But generic gratitude floats pleasantly above your life without anchoring into specific sensory experience. It does not reach the layer of the mind where your attractor pattern lives. It touches the surface and glides off. The subconscious is not moved by pleasant feelings. It is moved by vivid, specific, physically felt simulations of reality. There is a significant difference between those two things. Return to the life you were living back then, 3 years ago, without polishing the memory. Think about what you believed was possible for you then. What were you telling yourself quietly about what people like you could earn, could own, could experience? Were those beliefs running your life more than you realized? Most people, when they look back honestly, can see that the internal story they were living inside was more powerful than any strategy they tried to apply on top of it. The story was the engine. Everything else was noise. This is the mirror the chapter wants you to face before it moves on, not to make you feel behind, to show you what is actually doing the driving. Here is the open question this chapter will answer before it ends. If two people practice gratitude every single day for 1 year and one of them builds measurable financial momentum while the other stays exactly where they are, what is the difference between them? It is not discipline. It is not faith. It is something far more precise. Hold that question. Elena Marsh was a bookkeeper in a mid-sized accounting firm. She made $51,000 a year, kept a gratitude journal faithfully, and had a vision board on her closet door with pictures of a house on a lake and a number that represented her ideal salary. She was doing everything the books told her to do. Each morning she wrote, "I am grateful for my income. I am grateful for my health. I am grateful for my opportunities." She felt genuinely good when she wrote those words. Then she closed the journal. She drove to the same job. She sat at the same desk. Nothing moved. A friend recommended she try something different. Instead of writing what she was grateful for in general terms, she was told to spend 8 minutes each morning living inside a specific scene from the life she wanted, as if it had already happened. Not picturing it, living it. She chose one scene. The feeling of checking her business account on a Tuesday morning and seeing a balance that told her she had options. She felt the weight of her phone in her hand. She noticed the quality of light coming through a particular window. She heard the quiet of a room that was hers. She felt the specific sensation in her chest, not excitement, but settledness. The feeling of someone who has arrived somewhere and is not afraid of being sent back. 3 weeks later, she did not win the lottery. She did not quit her job, but she was offered a freelance contract that would add $19,000 to her annual income. She took it. More importantly, she recognized the opportunity in a way she would not have 6 months earlier. Her internal state had shifted to one that expected arrival instead of waiting for departure. The lesson in Elena's story is not the $19,000. Set that aside for one more moment. The lesson is what happened inside those 8 minutes each morning. She was not practicing gratitude. She was rehearsing having. Rehearsing having is the name for a very specific internal practice. It is the mechanism that separates people who manifest evidence of wanting from people who begin to move toward what they say they want. Here is the distinction that matters. Gratitude says, "I am thankful that things could be different." Rehearsing having says, "I am already operating from the state in which they are." One is appreciation at a distance. The other is occupation of the destination. The subconscious mind, which runs your attractor pattern, cannot distinguish between a fully sensory simulation and a lived experience. This is not metaphor. This is how memory, belief, and behavioral pattern formation actually work. You are not trying to trick your mind. You are giving it the data it needs to normalize a different reality. And normal is the operative word. Most manifestation teaching tells you to feel excited about what you want. Excitement is desire energy. Excitement is the frequency of not yet having. The feeling you are chasing is not excitement. It is the quiet, grounded, almost boring normalcy of already having. The settledness. The lack of urgency, the absence of the ache. Those feelings do not come from a list of abstract gratitudes. They come from specific sensory rehearsal of a scene you have chosen carefully and entered fully. Let's walk through how you do this. Choose one scene, not a montage of your desired life, not a highlight reel. One specific, ordinary moment from the life you intend to inhabit. It should be a moment of low drama and high truth, checking an account balance, sitting at a desk in a space you own, signing one document, having one phone conversation. The simpler the scene, the more accessible it is to your senses. The more effective it is as a rehearsal tool. Now enter the scene physically. Where are you sitting or standing? What are you touching? What is the temperature of the room? What are you wearing? Is there sound or silence? What does the light look like? Go through each sense deliberately. Do not rush this. The specificity is the point. Vagueness keeps you at the surface. Each precise detail drives the simulation deeper into the layer of the mind you are trying to reach. Then feel the emotional weather of the moment, not the peak feeling, the ambient feeling. What does it feel like to be someone for whom this scene is ordinary? What does your body feel like when it is not bracing for the other shoe to drop? Find that physical sensation in your chest, your shoulders, your breath. Stay there. 8 minutes. Do not analyze it. Do not explain it to yourself. Simply inhabit it. This is not daydreaming. Daydreaming is passive. You are a spectator watching yourself in a future scene, and that keeps the emotional distance of wanting intact. Rehearsing having is first person, present tense, sensory occupation. You are not watching someone else's arrival. You are inside the body of someone who has already arrived. The difference in internal experience between those two approaches is enormous. And the difference in outcome, compounded over weeks and months of daily practice, is the answer to the question posed at the start of this chapter. 2 people practiced gratitude every day for a year. One built momentum. One did not. The difference was not discipline or belief. One of them stayed at the surface of gratitude while the other descended daily into the specific, sensory, body-felt simulation of already having. One was warming the hands near a fire. The other was inside the fire, learning that the heat was their natural temperature. Soon, you will run into an idea about vision boards that clashes with the familiar story. After that clicks, it changes how you use images, memories, and future scenes entirely. For now, notice what is required of you in the rehearsing having practice. You are not required to believe. You are not required to feel confident. You are not required to have evidence that what you want is coming. You are required only to find the specific scene, enter it physically through your senses, locate the ambient emotional feeling of already being there, and stay for 8 minutes. That is the entire practice. Small, repeatable, precise. Vague gratitude will always feel good and change nothing. Specific sensory rehearsal of already having rewires the subconscious transmitter. One lives at the level of thought. The other lives at the level of signal. Your attractor pattern responds to signal, not sentiment. The scene is already there, waiting to be inhabited. Which one will you choose? Chapter 7. Money follows identity, not intention. Intention alone has never made anyone wealthy. That sounds like an attack on everything you have been taught about the power of belief and vision. It is not. It is a precise observation about why 2 people can want the same thing with equal desperation, speak the same affirmations with equal feeling, and arrive at completely different financial lives. The difference is not in how hard they wanted it. The difference is in who they believed they were while they were doing the wanting. And that distinction is the one most manifestation teaching skips entirely. You already made a choice at the end of the last chapter. Now the question is what that choice actually requires from you. Choosing differently is not the same as becoming someone different. You can decide in a moment. But identity moves at a slower, deeper pace. This chapter is about that pace, and about the invisible ceiling it creates, the one that is not made of circumstance or economy or luck, but of the self-concept you have been maintaining, often without realizing it, for years. There is a word worth sitting with here: congruence. Not a complicated idea, but a precise one. Congruence means that what you are on the inside matches what you are reaching for on the outside. When those 2 things are aligned, movement happens almost without effort. When they are not aligned, the gap becomes a kind of friction, invisible, constant, exhausting. No amount of intention will overcome it. Here is the open loop this chapter will carry. There is a version of you right now today who is already making financial decisions, evaluating opportunities and filtering what is possible. You may think you are doing this consciously, based on logic and available information. You are not. Something else is doing most of that filtering. And until you understand what that something is, intention stays noise. Picture the life you were living back then, 3 years ago, without polishing the memory. Not generally, specifically. Think about the number that represented your monthly income, or the number in your savings account, or the number you told yourself was the most you could realistically earn. Think about whether that number has changed significantly, or whether it has drifted within a familiar range, rising a little, falling a little, but never breaking through in any permanent way. If that range feels familiar, if it feels almost like home, that is not a coincidence. That is your identity ceiling. The identity ceiling is not a metaphor. It functions like a thermostat. A thermostat does not care what temperature you want the room to be. It only enforces the temperature it is set to. You can open a window, pour cold water on the floor, or argue with it. Eventually, it will bring the room back to the set point. Your subconscious self-concept works exactly the same way. It has a set point for who you are, what you earn, what you own, and what you deserve. When your outer life drifts above that set point, something inside you finds a way to bring it back down. Not maliciously, automatically. A man named Curtis learned this the expensive way. Curtis grew up watching his father work 2 jobs and still come up short every month. Not dramatically short, just consistently, quietly short. The kind of shortfall that never became a crisis but never became freedom either. Curtis absorbed this the way children absorb everything, not as a lesson but as a fact. This was what money did. It came and it went. You never quite had enough. You worked hard, you stayed humble, and you got by. At 31, Curtis started a small logistics company. Within 2 years, he had more clients than he could handle and more money coming in than his father had made in any decade of his life. He felt good. He felt proud. And then, over the next 18 months, he made a series of decisions that each seemed reasonable in isolation. He hired people he did not need. He expanded into a new city before the first one was profitable. He bought equipment on credit at exactly the wrong moment. None of these decisions were stupid. Each one made a kind of surface sense. But together, they brought his income back down to a range that felt, honestly, more familiar, more like home. Curtis did not fail because he lacked ability. He failed because his identity had a ceiling. When he broke through it, everything in him conspired to restore the set point. He spent years thinking the problem was strategy. The problem was never strategy. Here is what the wanting loop does to identity. When you rehearse wanting, when you spend your emotional energy on the feeling of not yet having, you are not moving toward anything. You are reinforcing a self-concept. Specifically, you are reinforcing the identity of a person who wants, not a person who has, not a person who is, a person who wants. And the mind, which is extraordinarily loyal to its own self-concept, will keep constructing a reality that matches that identity with remarkable precision. This is why the frequency of lack is so persistent. It is not just an emotion. It is a self-definition. When you feel lack long enough, lack stops being a condition you are in and starts being a person you are. The transition is gradual and mostly unconscious. But once it happens, every opportunity that passes through your awareness gets filtered through that identity. You do not see the same landscape that someone with a different self-concept sees. You see the version your identity allows. That last sentence is the mechanical truth this whole chapter is building toward. Intention without identity congruence is noise. The subconscious self-concept determines which opportunities you even perceive, not which ones you pursue, which ones you notice. The ones that fall outside your identity do not get rejected. They get invisible. You walk past them the way you walk past conversations in a language you do not speak. They are happening. You simply cannot access them. Consider two people at the same networking event. Same room, same speakers, same conversations available. One of them is operating from an identity congruent with financial expansion. The other is operating from an identity rooted in scarcity and overcoming. The first person hears an offhand remark about a partnership opportunity and their brain flags it immediately. It is relevant. It is in their range. The second person hears the same remark and their brain processes it as background noise. Not relevant, not in their range. Neither of them made a conscious choice about what to notice. Their identity made that choice for them. This is why telling yourself to be more alert, more opportunistic, more positive is not enough. You cannot willpower your way past a deeply held self-concept. The self-concept runs faster and deeper than willpower ever will. So how does identity actually change? Not through affirmations repeated without feeling. Not through a vision board you look at while feeling the ache of not having. Both of those practices, done the way most people do them, reinforce the wanting loop rather than dissolving it. They keep the gap alive. They keep the identity of the wanter intact. Identity changes through rehearsal of a different kind. Not rehearsing the want, rehearsing the having. There is a neurological difference between imagining a future state from the outside and inhabiting a present state from the inside. Seeing yourself getting there keeps you outside looking in. Feeling the specific texture of a life where the money is already there, where your decisions come from different ground entirely, that begins to rewrite the set point. This is not mystical language. It is how the brain consolidates identity. You become fluent in a language by using it before you feel ready, by speaking it as if it is already yours. You become congruent with a financial identity the same way, not by dreaming about it, but by practicing the specific interior state of someone who already occupies it. What does a person with a healthy, functional relationship with money actually feel like on an ordinary Tuesday? Not on the day they close a big deal, not in the moment of celebration. On a Tuesday, when they look at a bill, what is the quality of the thought that follows? When a large opportunity appears, what is the first sensation in their chest, excitement or anxiety? When they spend money on something important, do they feel guilt afterward, or do they simply move forward? You probably do not know exactly how that feels, but you can begin to approximate it. You can practice the emotional texture of it. Not as a lie you tell yourself, but as a deliberate rehearsal of a new identity. The way an actor practices a role until the role begins to feel like memory rather than performance. Later on, you will run into an idea about visualization that clashes with the familiar story. Once you grasp that turn, it changes what you actually do when you sit down to practice. Now here is where the open loop closes. Earlier in this chapter, the question was this: what is doing the filtering? What is determining which opportunities you see and which ones stay invisible to you? The answer is your identity. Specifically, the self-concept you have been rehearsing, unconsciously, through every emotional reaction to money you have had since childhood. That concept is the filter. It is not fate. It is not fixed. But it is deeply stable, and it will not move because you intend it to. It will only move when you begin rehearsing having instead of wanting, when you close the gap not through achievement, but through identity first. Intention is a direction. Identity is the vehicle. And a vehicle set to the wrong destination will carry you there faithfully, no matter how clearly you can picture somewhere else on a map. Whose identity are you rehearsing right now? Chapter 8. The decisions people with money make automatically. Right now, while you are reading or listening to this, a decision is being made without you, not by someone else, by the version of you that has not yet been built, and the cost of that missing version is not showing up as a dramatic loss. It is showing up as a steady, quiet drain. Options you do not even know you are not taking, the investment conversation you did not start, the price you did not ask for, the opportunity you recognized too late or not at all. Each one of those non-events is not neutral. It is a compounding absence. Money deferred is not money delayed. It is money that grows in someone else's account while yours stays flat. And the mechanism behind all of it is invisible unless you know exactly where to look. The cause is not bad luck. It is not the market or your upbringing or the timing. It is the identity running in the background of every financial decision you make. That identity is either working for you or against you every single hour. This chapter shows you exactly how. You ended the last chapter with a question sitting in your chest. Whose identity are you rehearsing right now? It is the kind of question that does not let you move on quickly. Somewhere underneath the daily routine of bills and income and spending, there is a set of automatic behaviors running on a loop. You did not consciously choose most of them. They came with the emotional environment you absorbed earliest and most repeatedly. But here is what matters now. Those automatic behaviors are not fixed. They are just practiced. And the people who have built real, durable wealth are not practicing the same things you were taught to practice. Here is what no one tells you plainly enough. Wealthy people do not make smart financial decisions because they studied harder or got luckier or had a better starting point, though some did. They make those decisions automatically, without friction, because their sense of who they are makes certain choices feel obvious, natural, not even particularly brave. And the gap between you and those outcomes is not primarily a knowledge gap. It is an identity gap. This chapter maps that gap with precision. 5 specific decisions. 5 places where the automatic behavior of a wealth identity produces radically different outcomes than the automatic behavior of a lack identity. And when you see each one clearly, you will begin to understand why information alone has never been enough to close the distance. Let's start with the first one. People who carry a wealth identity price their time from the inside out. When someone asks them what their rate is, or what they charge, or what they would need to make a deal work, the number they give comes from a calculation anchored in their own sense of value, not from what they fear the other person will accept, not from what they think they deserve based on past results, from what they know their time produces. A person operating from a lack identity prices from the outside in. They watch the room. They read the face. They lower the number before it is even rejected, often before it is even asked. They negotiate against themselves in the silence before the conversation starts. The cost of this is not just one contract or one salary. It is every contract and every salary that follows, because each one becomes the baseline for the next. There was a woman named Claire who built a small consulting practice over 7 years. She was genuinely skilled. Her clients got results. But every time a new client asked for her rate, she felt a physical tightening in her chest, and without thinking, she softened the number. Not by a little, by 30, sometimes 40%. She told herself she was being reasonable, practical. She called it knowing her market. But what she was actually doing was rehearsing a specific emotional frequency. The frequency of someone who does not fully believe the value they carry is real. One afternoon, a longtime client referred her to a colleague, and that colleague asked her rate without flinching. Claire gave her number. The colleague said simply, "That sounds fair," and they moved forward. Claire sat at her desk afterward and did something she had not done in 7 years. She added up the difference between what she had charged clients and what she could have charged them. The number she arrived at was not a small difference. It was a house down payment, quietly compounded year over year, one softened number at a time. You felt something reading that, maybe recognition, maybe a specific memory surfacing. The second automatic decision is this: people with a wealth identity invest before they feel financially ready, not recklessly. Deliberately. When they encounter an opportunity that aligns with their direction, they do not wait until all risk is removed. They understand on a cellular level that risk removal and wealth creation are not compatible goals. The lack identity defaults to waiting, waiting for more stability, waiting for more certainty, waiting for the right moment. But waiting has a cost that never appears on a bank statement. Every month you wait to start investing, even modestly, the compounding that should be working for you is working for someone else who started. Not because they were more ready, because readiness was not the deciding factor for them. Revisit the life you were living back then, 3 years ago, without polishing the memory. Specifically, what financial decision were you putting off because the timing did not feel right? What would that decision be worth now if you had made it then? Not as a way to punish yourself, as a way to see the mechanism clearly. That delay was not laziness. It was an identity default. It was the automatic response of someone rehearsing lack, rehearsing the feeling of not yet having enough to act. Wealth identity people act first at a smaller scale and build from there. They do not wait to feel wealthy before they move. They move, and the moving is what produces the feeling. The third automatic decision is opportunity recognition. This one is subtle enough that most people miss it entirely. People operating from a wealth identity notice different things in the same room as people operating from lack. They are not smarter. Their attention is calibrated differently. When they walk into a business, a conversation, a new environment, their default question is something like, "Where is the value here that is not being captured yet?" The lack identity default question is something closer to, "What is this going to cost me?" Both questions are asked in under a second. Neither is conscious. Both determine everything about what the person sees and what they do next. This is why two people can sit in the same meeting and leave with completely different information. One of them heard a problem, the other heard a contract. One of them heard a complaint, the other heard a market gap. The filter is not intelligence. The filter is identity, and the filter runs automatically. You cannot override it by trying harder in the moment. You can only change it by changing what runs underneath. The fourth decision is negotiation. People with a wealth identity negotiate as a default, not as a confrontation. They do not experience asking for better terms as an aggressive act or a social risk. They experience it as a normal part of any transaction. When they get a quote, they ask about the process. When they receive an offer, they respond with a counter, not because they are difficult. Because they understand that the opening number in any conversation is an invitation to continue talking, not a final statement. People operating from lack hear the first number and either accept it immediately out of relief or reject it immediately out of fear. Both responses close the conversation. Both cost money. The compound value of never negotiating rent, salaries, vendor costs, service fees is one of the most invisible wealth gaps that exists. Here is the open loop this chapter introduced and has been building toward. Earlier, the question was, what is the invisible mechanism behind all the decisions that do not go the way you need them to go? The answer is not strategy. It is not information. It is the identity running in the background. And there is a fifth automatic decision that makes this clearest of all. The fifth decision is reinvestment. People with a wealth identity automatically route a portion of every inflow back into something that will grow, not because of discipline in the traditional sense, because to them, spending every dollar that arrives feels incomplete, unnatural, like leaving food on the table. The lack identity experiences every inflow as relief. It routes money immediately toward the pressure that feels most urgent: debt, bills, the thing that has been causing the most anxiety. The money arrives and disappears into the hole that was already there. This is not a character flaw. It is a frequency. It is the frequency of someone rehearsing scarcity. Someone whose default state is managing shortage rather than building position. The wanting loop keeps this cycle running. Every visualization that starts from a feeling of not yet having, every vision board that captures what is missing, every affirmation that begins with the emotional signature of wanting rather than having, all of it trains the identity to stay in the place just before arrival. And the decisions that flow from that identity, the softened price, the delayed investment, the missed opportunity, the accepted first offer, the spent inflow, all of them compound quietly in the background, until the gap between where you are and where you intended to be becomes something you call bad luck or bad timing. Wealthy people do not make better decisions because they have money. They have money because their identity makes those decisions automatic. That sentence is the load-bearing wall of this entire chapter. Read it again. Let it fully settle, because if it is true, and the behavioral evidence from thousands of studied cases suggests that it is, then the path forward is not a new financial strategy. It is not a better spreadsheet or a different investment vehicle. It is the construction of a new automatic self, one whose defaults are calibrated to the behaviors above, one who prices from the inside out, invests before feeling ready, sees opportunity first, negotiates as a matter of course, and reinvests as a natural instinct. As this book keeps moving, you will run into an idea about desire that clashes with the familiar story, about how wanting something intensely is supposed to work in your favor. And when you see it clearly, the contradiction will resolve in a way that changes every intentional practice you currently run. But first, you have to understand where you are standing right now. You have to see your current identity clearly enough to choose a different one deliberately, not by performing different behaviors and hoping the identity catches up. The other direction entirely. The question that opens the next chapter is this: if your decisions are currently automatic, how do you interrupt the pattern long enough to install a new one? Chapter 9. Stop asking and start receiving. Every civilization that has ever risen and faded left behind the same unspoken question. It was scratched into walls, buried in stories, woven into rituals. Why do some people seem to draw good things toward them while others, equally desperate, equally hopeful, watch those same good things move away? This pattern is older than money. It is older than markets. It appears in every culture that ever tried to make sense of why effort does not always equal outcome, and why two people can want the same thing with equal ferocity and arrive at completely different lives. The answer has been whispered through generations, dressed in different languages and different metaphors. Most people still miss it. It sits in a place they have never thought to look. You are about to look there, right now, in this chapter. The last chapter ended by raising a question, and it is still in the room. If your decisions are currently automatic, how do you interrupt the pattern long enough to install a new one? Hold that question. The answer is not a technique. It is not a breathing exercise or a journaling prompt. It is a change in posture, not the posture of your body, the posture of your identity. That is what this chapter is about. And that is what most people, even serious students of manifestation, never fully grasp. Here is the open loop you need to sit with. There is a version of you who already knows how to receive. You have always had access to them. The question is why you keep choosing the version who is still asking. You already know 𝗓𝗄𝗧𝗘. She came into this book clutching a vision board and a feeling she was doing everything right. She visualized every morning. She scripted wealth into a notebook. She read affirmations aloud in the mirror until her voice went hoarse. And every month, money arrived just close enough to pay the bills and left just fast enough to confirm her deepest fear, that she was not the kind of person wealth stays with. She wanted so hard it ached. And that ache was the problem. When 𝗓𝗄𝗧𝗘 first understood the wanting loop, she thought the solution was to want differently, more specifically, more vividly. She bought a new notebook and filled it with more precise desires. The make of the car, the square footage of the house, the exact number in the account. She believed detail was the missing ingredient. It was not. What shifted for 𝗓𝗄𝗧𝗘, and this is worth slowing down for, was not what she pictured. It was who was doing the picturing. She was at a small dinner one evening with two colleagues who had the kind of financial ease she had been chasing for years. She watched them order without checking prices. She watched them talk about money the way you talk about weather, as something that simply exists around you, not something you are fighting for. For the first time, 𝗓𝗄𝗧𝗘 did not feel envy. She felt something quieter. She felt recognition. She thought, they are not trying to become wealthy people. They already think they are one. She drove home that night and sat in her car for 20 minutes. No podcast, no phone call, she just sat. And something in her rearranged itself. Not dramatically, not with a flash of light. It was more like a drawer that had always been slightly out of alignment finally sliding shut the way it was always supposed to. She was not a person striving toward wealth. She was a person in whose direction wealth moved naturally. That was not an affirmation she was reciting. It was a decision she was making about who she was. The difference between those two things is the entire distance between where you are and where you want to be. Call up the life you were living back then, 3 years ago, without polishing the memory. Not the circumstances, forget the numbers, the address, the job title for a moment. Think about how you felt about money. Did you feel like someone waiting for permission to have it? Did you feel like someone who had to justify wanting more? Did you feel, even slightly, like someone on the outside of something, pressing your face against the glass of a life that was meant for other people? If that feeling has not fully left you, then what you have been missing is not a better method. It is a different identity. Here is the thing about asking. Asking contains, inside it, the assumption that you do not already have what you are asking for. Every prayer, every visualization, every affirmation that begins from a place of need broadcasts that same frequency, the frequency of lack. Your circumstances, your decisions, your automatic behaviors all respond to that frequency before your conscious mind ever gets a vote. You rehearse wanting. And then you wonder why wanting is what you keep producing. Receiving is a completely different posture. Receiving assumes. It assumes that the thing you want already belongs to you in some meaningful sense, not as a fantasy, not as a delusion, but as a settled fact about who you are. The person who receives does not grip. They do not perform certainty. They simply act in a way that is consistent with the version of themselves who already lives inside the outcome. And the gap between their current circumstances and that outcome does not feel like evidence that they are wrong. It feels like a gap that is closing. That is the shift, not the circumstances. Not yet. The relationship to the gap. Now the loop closes. You asked how to interrupt an automatic pattern long enough to install a new one. Here is the answer. You cannot interrupt a pattern by adding more of the same energy. You cannot ask your way out of an asking posture. The interruption happens in a single moment of decision, not a decision about what you want, but a decision about who you are. That decision is not made once and then forgotten. It is made every morning when you wake up. It is made every time you look at your bank balance. It is made every time you are in a room with someone who has what you want and you feel that old familiar pull toward envy or dismissal. In that moment, you choose. Camille chose. The money did not arrive the next day. But she stopped being surprised when it started arriving more consistently, because she had stopped being someone who expected it not to. One practical note, and precision matters here. Inhabiting the identity of someone who receives does not mean pretending your current circumstances do not exist. It means refusing to let your current circumstances define the story about who you fundamentally are. There is a difference between acknowledging a gap and living inside it as though it is your permanent address. The person who receives knows their financial situation today without confusing it with their financial identity. They can say, honestly, this is where my numbers are right now. And they can say, equally honestly, this is not the last word on who I am in relation to money. That distinction, knowing without identifying, is the thing Camille learned in the car that night. It is the thing most manifestation teachers never teach you because they are too busy selling you better techniques for asking. In a later section, you will run into an idea about vision boards and visualization that clashes with the familiar story. When that point settles, it changes how you use every tool you have ever tried. But for now, the principle is this: wealth does not arrive in response to your need for it. It arrives in response to your readiness to hold it, and readiness is not an emotion you feel. It is a decision about who you are. Make the decision, not for the wealth, for yourself. The wealth is simply what follows. Chapter 10. Your vision board was always the wrong tool. You made the board, you know you did. You cut the pictures, maybe printed them, arranged them with care, the house, the number in the bank account, the car, the version of life that felt just slightly out of reach. You put it somewhere you would see it. Every morning, maybe, every night before sleep. You looked at it and you felt something. That feeling was real. The desire was real. But here is what nobody told you. Every time you looked at that board and felt the pull of wanting, you were rehearsing a single, specific emotional signal. Not wealth, not having, wanting. You were practicing the frequency of not yet, day after day, with complete sincerity and total dedication. The board was not drawing those things toward you. It was confirming in the most visceral way your nervous system knows that those things were over there and you were over here. And the distance between you was very, very real. That is a hard thing to sit with. Sit with it anyway. The previous chapter left you with a decision. Not a plan, not a technique, a decision about who you are. Readiness, you heard, is not a feeling. It is a choice. That choice, once made, changes the instrument you bring to every practice, every visualization, every quiet moment when you think about the life you are building. This chapter is about the one practice most people in the manifestation world get exactly backwards. By the time it ends, you will not see your vision board the same way again. Bring to mind the life you were living back then, 3 years ago, without polishing the memory. Not the circumstances, the feeling underneath the circumstances. Did you feel like someone who had not yet arrived? Did your inner monologue carry a low, persistent note of almost, of someday, of I am getting there? Now ask yourself honestly, has that note changed? Or have you simply accumulated more information about why you deserve the thing you have not yet allowed yourself to have? The want grew louder. The evidence of wanting grew more elaborate. The gap, strangely, remained. That is the wanting loop, and it has been running longer than you realize. A woman named Clara kept her vision board on the inside of her closet door for 4 years. Every morning, while reaching for clothes, she saw it. The duplex she wanted to own, the savings number she had chosen, a picture of someone sitting at a desk working for themselves. She looked at it daily. She felt the pull of it daily. She told anyone who asked that she was working toward those things. She was, in some ways. She saved carefully. She researched. She made small moves. But 4 years passed and the board felt just as distant as the day she made it. One evening she sat with the board longer than usual and she noticed something. Every single image triggered a small, quiet ache. Not excitement, ache, the ache of longing. She had spent 4 years not visualizing her future. She had spent 4 years rehearsing her distance from it. The next morning she took the board down. Not to give up. To start over with a completely different question. The question she had been asking was, what do I want? The question she needed was, who am I right now when the wanting is gone? That distinction is not subtle. It is the entire thing. Here is the open question this chapter will close before it ends. If you removed every image of things you do not yet have, what would you put on the wall instead? Hold that question. The answer is coming, and it will be more specific than you expect. What manifesting culture taught you was that a vision board is a prayer. You show the universe what you want, and the universe responds. The problem with that framing is not the universe. The problem is the word want. Want is a feeling that lives in scarcity. Want knows there is a gap. Want stares across the gap and yearns. When you rehearse that feeling every morning, you are not attracting the object of your desire. You are reinforcing the internal architecture of someone who does not have it. The frequency of lack is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It hides inside hope. It hides inside vision boards. It hides inside affirmations that begin with the words I want and I will and someday every sentence that points to a future you do not inhabit yet is a small confirmation that you are not there. Compounded over months, over years, it becomes the loudest signal your subconscious sends into everything you do. So what do you do instead? You build a different board, not a board of wants, a board of already am. This is not about lying to yourself. It is not about pretending. It is about choosing deliberately and with full awareness the identity you are inhabiting right now. Not tomorrow. Now, the version of you that makes decisions the way a person of wealth makes decisions. Not because you have the money yet, because you have the character of someone who does, steady, unhurried, discerning, clear about value, not anxious around money, fluent in it. That person exists. That person is not waiting for the account balance to change before showing up. That person is already here. And the board you build reflects who that person is, not what they are still chasing. The images change. Not to things, but to states. Not a picture of a big house, but an image that makes you feel settled, rooted, permanent. Not a bank number written in a font meant to impress, but something that makes you feel the quiet confidence of someone who is not scrambling. Not the car as a trophy, but whatever triggers the feeling of ease in movement, in freedom, in arriving without stress. The shift is away from objects and toward the emotional signature of the person who has them naturally, without drama, without a story about how hard they worked to get there. The frequency of lack disappears when you stop giving it daily exercise. Now close the open question. If you removed every image of something you do not yet have, what would you put on the wall instead? Here is what most people discover when they try. They reach for images and they feel nothing. Because the images they reach for are still objects. Keep reaching. Go past the objects. What does it feel like to move through a Tuesday without financial anxiety in your chest? Find the image that carries that feeling. What does it feel like to make a decision about money and feel certain, not hopeful? Find that. What does it feel like to be someone for whom wealth is simply a natural expression of who you are, not an achievement you are still working toward? Put that on the wall. Look at it every morning. Not to feel the ache of wanting it, to recognize it, to say quietly, this is me. This is who I already am in the places that count. Clara rebuilt her board over a weekend. She used almost no pictures of things. She used colors that made her feel calm. A photograph of her grandmother's hands, which always made her feel that she came from people who built things. One sentence she had written herself, not an affirmation, but a statement of character. She looked at the new board for the first time and felt something she had not expected. Not excitement, not longing, something quieter and far more powerful. Recognition. The wanting loop breaks the moment you stop feeding it. The moment you look at your practice and say, this is not a petition I am filing. This is a portrait of who I am, and portraits do not beg, they simply are. You are not someone who wants wealth. You are someone who inhabits the frequency of it and allows it to arrive. That is not a sentence to repeat. That is a reality to embody every morning in every choice, in every image you choose to hold in your mind as yours. The board was never the problem. The question it was answering was.